great. You can even drink water through the platypus mask. All right, so that was just a little something to get us started. And to me, jazz represents a whole lot of things, but to make it short and brief as possible, to me it represents every part of the United States of America, democracy. Every person is important. Every vote counts. It's really emblematic of what democracy should be. And it's been that way since the beginning of jazz, and even before with blues and ragtime music leading up to what we know as jazz today. It was a whole evolution that just kept changing and evolving and adding new people. Now jazz is a worldwide event. You can have, there's all kinds of Latin jazz, Brazilian jazz, Afro-Cuban jazz, Mexican jazz. Every country has its own input into what jazz means today. So it's really a worldwide freedom event. And the music represents freedom because of one main thing, which is the idea of improvisation. And it's really a mystery for a lot of people where to start with improvisation. And I think we all should, when we think about that, what do I do? What do I practice? First thing to remember, and the most important thing, I think every jazz musician will tell you, is that jazz, like African American music, and before it, African music, all kinds of Aboriginal music, is passed on orally. It's an oral tradition. So the very fundamental part of jazz is what a lot of people try to skip, and that is copying and emulating what you hear the masters play. A lot of people think, well, if I just learn the theory, then I'll be able to improvise all this great stuff. Well, it doesn't work that way. It's not just about theory, it's about the language. All parts of the jazz language, and as it has evolved, there's more and more parts to learn. So it can be a little bit mysterious and overwhelming, but now it's so accessible to learn about jazz history on internet. You all have YouTube, and it's free if you watch the commercials. And when I was younger, you would learn by two main ways, and that was just by reading books about jazz, and there weren't that many in the 70s when I was starting to learn about jazz, and listening to the music. And so for me, it was just kind of natural. Well, I want to sound like Miles Davis, so I put the record on, and I painstakingly memorized a lot of Miles Davis solos. I tried to emulate the sound of Miles Davis. And at the same time, I was transcribing solos and trying to play high on the trumpet, so I was transcribing Maynard Ferguson. So I got two vastly different approaches right off the bat, ingrained in my spirit of jazz. So hopefully that stuff comes out when I play. Of course, there was many others that I emulated and transcribed and copied. Clifford Brown was one of my main guys. He was a great bebop trumpet player. Transcribed his solos, which was pretty difficult, but mostly eighth notes, so it wasn't all that difficult. And now you have technology which can help you. You can get on YouTube and find all the great solos through jazz history already transcribed for you. All you got to do is read along and play them while you listen to it on YouTube. I know there's a bunch of J.J. Johnson transcriptions. There's Freddie Hubbard transcriptions. He was my main source of inspiration when I was in graduate school. I was all about Freddie Hubbard, and I memorized and transcribed a bunch of his stuff. So the theory about that, for me, really came later. And I think a lot of jazz musicians will tell you the same thing. You kind of learn the theory as you go along. And so there's a packet, I know, that's been included in this that you can look at. It has some jazz patterns that I think are good for people to learn as well. And I really learned the importance of patterns, the first pattern on there, from a clinic that I heard of the great saxophonist Bob Mintzer. And he really stressed the fact that we need to all learn our scales. First of all, the major scales, and there are 12. Some of them are easier than others. And be able to outline the diatonic harmony of a scale. And so he stressed the importance of major scales and harmonic minor scales. So I'll give you just a demonstration of how jazz musicians familiarize themselves with a key. So in the key of B flat concert, this is my scale. And I can derive all of the seventh chords in the key of B flat major from that scale just by arpeggiating from the root up. And then you can make it more melodic by playing the first one up and then go up a half step to the seventh of the second chord and play down from the seventh. So I'm arpeggiating all of the seventh chords that are available from the sound of B flat major. So if you do that in all 12 keys, you can imagine you've got a big arsenal of harmonic, progressive, melodic and harmonic melodies. So you can do the same thing with the harmonic minor scale and you get a different set of seventh chords. So you get a whole different set, and if you do that in all 12 keys, then you have many, many more chords that you can outline. So patterns are good. They're good to learn, and there are many more which are included in the packet. That's just the very beginning. There's also what we call 2-5-1 chord progression patterns in that packet, which are just these things like this. And I'll do pattern number 1. And so forth through all 12 keys. You learn those in all 12 keys, then you can outline any 2-5-1 chord progression adequately. And of course, there are many different patterns. You can arpeggiate down from the seventh. Many, many patterns that you can learn, and I think I'll end with that, so you can all, if you got the packet of jazz patterns, those are good to practice and learn. So I will hand it off to who's next? Professor Nichol, thank you.
Yes, and that was Robbie Smith, and he's our Director of Jazz Studies. So thank you, Robbie, very much, and a brilliant musician, and we're so thrilled and feel fortunate to have him on our faculty with us. Helping us with jazz and all the work we do in that direction. I'm Professor John Nichol at Central Michigan University, the saxophone professor. There's a handout that I do believe Kristen Pagels has uploaded to Zoom, so you might want to look at it because I'm going to work off of that particular handout. First thing is, I think young people need a lesson book. And very inexpensive are the Rubank Advanced 1 and Advanced 2. This is high school material. I think they should be in every band room in the country. and students should have access to these. And then you need to work with someone, a qualified teacher and band director, to work with you on this Rubank Advanced 1 and Advanced 2, because we have to get some chops, we have to learn our major scales, we have to learn our minor scales, we have to learn our arpeggios. Next, I really, really like this book, Daily Studies. I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not. Trent Keniston is retired from Western Michigan University, and this is a wonderful book of scales and arpeggios. I think that this is something that's very, very valuable to own. Trent Keniston, you'll see the name there, and that would be worth having and working off of and using. Jamie Abersold has done a ton of good work, and you can go to jazzbooks.com. Jazzbooks.com, that's a website he's affiliated with, and I strongly recommend these play-along recordings with books. There's 133 volumes of these, Duke Ellington and many others, but I particularly encourage young players to get volume 54. Purchase volume 54. Can you see it okay? Yeah, good. And this has an F blues, it has a B-flat blues, it has some modal tunes, it's got some really neat hip tunes in it, and I think that this is something you should have and work off of, and they'll show you a motor scale that you can use, and this will launch you on your career of improvisation. By yourself, regretfully, and not with a combo, but this is a place to start, and then you can progress from there. It's called Maiden Voyage, Volume 54. I think saxophonists need to decide if they're going to be a tenor player or an alto player or a bari player. And if you're going to be an alto player, I think you need to work with Charlie Parker Omnibook. That's gold. That's golden. That's Charlie Parker solos, 1945, and around that day. Incredible. And very, very valuable, and you listen to Charlie and you play the solos, and that can be really, really helpful. A good tenor one, and I'm only recommending one book per, is going to be Dexter Gordon, Solos for Tenor, and this would be a wonderful resource for you to have, okay? A free download, thanks to Jamie Abersold. It's free. You go to jazzbooks.com, Jazz Handbook, Jamie Abersold. Huge, very valuable. You could work off this. This could be a curriculum. This could be a course for you. And it's very helpful. Table of contents, valuable jazz information, soloing, he talks about it, suggested listening, artists, historically significant recordings, which ones you should listen to, scales, scale syllabus, ear training exercises, theory exercises, even piano voicings are here, jazz articulation explained, transposition charts. I think this is invaluable and underused in a major way. It's a free download. Why not go get it and see what you can learn about jazz? There's a whole theory practice assignment that people can do and lists of wonderful players for you to listen to. I strongly recommend that. It's free. Jazz Handbook, Jamie Abersold. Something we're using at the university with great success is an application on our phone called Tonal Energy. Some call it TE. It's got a tuner, it's got a metronome. Most of you have phones, most all of you. Tuner and a metronome, and it's on your phone, and it's something that you can use. Download Tonal Energy. Next area is going to be some saxophone jazz mouthpieces. I'm a Van Doren artist, and I listed Van Doren mouthpieces here. The soprano one, alto, an A7, maybe an A6, tenor, a T7, I play on that mouthpiece, baritone B7, one of our baritone saxophonists at the university plays on that. Also reeds to match it. Reed thing is kind of complicated because Van Doren has greens, they have reds, they have ZZs. You need to match the reed to the mouthpiece. but I've given you some suggestions with that. Today I played on a Meyer 5M that I've played on for years. Importance of streaming services. Last night I listened to jazz for an hour. I went to Apple Music. I pay $10 a month, and they have a jazz station, radio station, and selections. What a gas. Stuff I wouldn't necessarily listen to, and if it's things I know, I can move on to something else. I listed many streaming services, and I don't know why, but most of us at the university are probably using Apple or maybe Pandora, who knows. My son Jonathan, who's a professor, uses Tidal. There's reasons for it, but here's the point. You don't need to buy a lot of CDs. Get a streaming service and start to listen. Get a streaming service and start to listen. And when we profs pay $10 a month, I think student rates are half that. So for $5 a month, you can save a lot of money and have it at your fingertips and on your phone, access to terrific music to listen to and learn. Radio stations on Apple, Johnny Hodges, radio station on Apple, Cannonball Adderley. Wow, just a wealth of material. And here's a list of saxophone superstars, a more inclusive list with Jamie Aebersold. But, you know, I love Cannonball Adderley. I listened to Paul Desmond last night. There's Charlie Parker on alto. And then some tenor players are listed. Barry players, go listen to Jerry Mulligan. Listen to Harry Carney with the Ellington Band. Something that's become expensive, but I think it's really wonderful, are these Jazz Icon DVDs, okay? And they've been remastered. I think there's 5 box sets with 10 DVDs in each box set. I listed the Count Basie Orchestra from 1962. When you hear the music, it's one thing. When you hear and see the video and see the embouchures and see the sweat and see the facial expressions, it's something yet again. And I really encourage you to check out these DVDs. You can buy them singly or in a box set, and maybe it's, if it costs a lot, have your library, public school library, maybe band library, maybe your town library, see if they can't purchase these with their acquisitions budgets. But I think that that would be wonderful for you to have an opportunity to see these concerts, to see Dexter Gordon live in '63 and '64 in Europe. It's breathtaking, it's wonderful to hear his voice as he introduces the tunes, et cetera, et cetera. Do I have a couple more minutes? I got a couple. When I go out and do clinics for the MSBOA, you got to get a big sound. Some of you got to get a bigger sound. And there's small alto tones, and there's small tenor sounds. Especially if you're the lead alto. You should be sitting in front of the lead trombone. You should be sitting in front of the lead trumpet player, and you got to lead that whole section by your sound and how you're playing. And all I'm saying is sometimes I hear these anemic sounds. To play is to blow, and it's going to take wind to play. And what I'm saying is with tone production, don't be afraid of getting a big sound. Get a hard enough reed, get a soft enough reed, get a good mouthpiece, and and support from your stomach and use your lungs. And I don't know, I just wanted to demonstrate just that little bit if I had anything to say. Think about tone. You know, on the MSBOA, which we use in the state of Michigan, evaluative sheets for solo and ensemble and for band and orchestra, tone is number 1. That's the top box. Number 2 is intonation. And sometimes people get in tone, they get in tune too, okay? But I think that that'd be the one thing I would leave with today if we're just not talking about a handout, is we got to get some air moving and got to get big, robust, gorgeous, beautiful, big tones to play with. So maybe we'll have some questions later, but I enjoyed giving this, and I hope it's helpful for you. Next is Bob Lindahl.
Hey, I have a handout that looks an awful lot like Professor Nichol's because I ripped it off because I'm a jazz player and I can do stuff like that. I like this format, and I'm not going to spend my time really talking through that whole thing, but that's useful information. I hope I put horns down on there. I'm a Conn-Selmer artist, so I play Conn, and Bach is my classical trombone, and King. And so I lean toward that, recommending those are really good horns for students to buy. And if you're looking for a jazz horn, you can get great deals on eBay. I recently got a new trombone that's used. It's 30 or 40 years old. I love it. So check out the whole field when you're looking at horns. Don't think that just because it's brand new, it's going to be the best horn that you're going to buy. There are really good brand new horns, and I listed a bunch of them. On the etude books, I wanted to mention Mark Nightingale has a whole bunch of little etude books that are just wonderful. The one called 20 Jazz Etudes is very difficult. University jazz programs use that kind of as a beginner textbook type of thing. But all the other ones leading up to the 20 Jazz Etudes are things that you can start with. And all the time I have students that want to learn jazz, so I have them do. Just because it says easy jazz tudes doesn't mean anything. It helps you with the style. You listen to the styles and you play, and there's little rock etudes and swing and faster swing and Latin, sambas, bosses. There's different things in these things, and it helps you get used to the way that you should be playing, the style. Style is the thing when I hear high school bands play, trombone players, is the thing they can improve first. Is what style. So, of course, listening, and I'm with John on all the live stream stuff. I listen to Sirius all the time in my car and sometimes at home. And I also subscribe to Apple Music. I have that in my office, and I do that at home. Sometimes it's amazing how many things you can listen to. I listed a whole bunch of trombone greats on there, and you can Google them or find them on YouTube. The J.J. Johnsons are good ones to start with. Because once you get to like Carl Fontana, Frank Rossellino, some of them, they're playing so fast and so high that you don't want to start with those. So I hope that that list handout that I gave you is useful. I want to talk more about playing trombone versus those other guys. So those other guys all have buttons to push, and trombone players don't have buttons to push. So I'm going to unmask for a second because I don't have platypus masks like Professor Smith. So on trombones, I hear trombone players play, first of all, swing. I'll just give a brief description of swing. Swing is not triplets. It's not like one, da, 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 because the typical trombone player goes, oh, I can swing then, I just do that. Well, that's not swing, because it doesn't have the right feel. And swing varies a lot according to tempo. If you're down and dirty playing swing blues, you might be like a 12/8 feel, which is almost like 3, but you don't go. It's more like. You have accents on different types of beats. And trombone players, because we don't have buttons, we don't play the legato, slurring type of stuff naturally like saxophones and trumpet players can do. So when I hear bands, I hear trombone sections that separate way too much. Hear stuff like that maybe. And we need to blow through phrases. So I'm going to just make sure that you go. Tempo has a lot to do. The faster you go, the less it's triplety, whatever. So don't think that, oh, I can swing because I'm going to triplet, make all these things into triplet feels, because that's not it. You have to listen to the music to do that. So that's an eighth note kind of thing. And to help you a lot, tonguing. tonguing is different for me, and I played for years without really realizing this, but lately it's come around. My tongue is in a completely different place playing swing and jazz than it is playing classical music. So if I'm playing something like, my tongue is relatively in the same place for every note I play. And it's close to my upper teeth, but it's not really touching the teeth. The lower I play, it might go a little bit lower. But it's relatively in the same place. So if I'm trying to swing, and this is what I found recently with some of the high school players I'm working with, as much as they try to get the feel, they don't until they release their tongue and let it go where it should go according to the brain. So they'll go, and they'll play like that because the tongue's in the same place all the way. All I have to do is let my tongue go anywhere it wants to. It's usually back up higher on the palate. And I don't think of ta, 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 ta at all. I'm thinking of do, 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 do. And actually, I use the alphabet to help me. So A, E, I, O, U, and I combine that with do. Daddle-dee-doo-die, daddle-dee-doo-die-doo-doo-doodle. And it works too, if you start tonguing really fast, you can use the alphabet and do daddle-dee-doo-die, daddle-dee-doo-diddle. And then the other thing is every time you do eighth note licks, all the eighth notes are long except for the last one, usually if you're listening to swing. And it depends what style you're doing, but if you're just doing swing, they're long. So if I do daddle-dee, daddle-dee. The first two eighth notes were long and the last one was short. If I add daddle-dee-doo-die, and my tongue's going daddle-dee-doo-die, I'm thinking daddle-dee-doo-die, daddle-dee-doo-die, daddle-dee-doo-die-doo-doo, daddle-dee-doo-die-doo-doo. So you see how I use the vowels help me in my head get things straight. Daddle-dee-doo-diddle, daddle-dee-doo-diddle-do, 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 daddle-dee, daddle-dee, daddle-dee-doo-die, daddle-dee-doo-die, daddle-dee-doo-die. Baba, dude. And we don't really do ba 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 because you're doing ba 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 moving your jaw. So we don't want to move our teeth. Daddle-dee-doo-diddle-do. And if you blow through things, I think high school trombone players, I think you'll sound better immediately, because it goes beyond just doing the rhythm right like swing. It has to do with blowing through stuff and emulating the people that have valves and buttons to push. Vibrato, real quick on vibrato. If you use vibrato in jazz in a section, if the lead player, you're playing a ballad and there's some vibrato in the lead player, it's okay if everybody vibratos, but not as much as the lead player. You don't want everybody vibratoing the same. So everybody else is going to vibrato either none at all or a little bit following the example of the lead player. And then the other thing is when you do slide vibrato, don't go above the pitch. Just do not go above the pitch. Players will do that, and that's above the pitch, and it sounds bad. It's out of tune. So you move your slide, and you go to the pitch, but not above it. And then the other thing is don't use vibrato all the time at the same speed. So you don't want to. So if somebody says to play vibrato in jazz, don't fall into that. That was too fast and it was too constant. We want more like what we call terminal vibrato. So I started the vibrato probably over half of the way through the duration of the note, and it changed in speeds and it got wider and you can vary that. It's a tool that you have, nuanced tool that you have. So anyway, I thought I'd talk a little bit about the trombone, and next we're going to hear from our bass professor, Ed Fedewa.
How are y'all doing today? Am I on? Is this on, you guys? Okay. I'll grab my bass here. For all you bass players out there, everything that you've heard so far is all legitimate. It all mostly applies to you as well. Maybe not the tonguing and all that stuff, but we have our cross to bear on our instrument as well. Listening, you know, is paramount. You have to listen. You have to love it. Number one, you have to love what you're hearing. You know, with the history of the way I grew up playing, is I got turned on to jazz after being in rock bands, and then I started getting into the history and looking at the history of this instrument. I fell in love with the instrument, and then I started digging deep into who played it, when was it developed, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the first things I always ask a student is, no matter if they're classical or jazz, I like to say, who are you listening to? And if I get more than about a 3-second pause, I kind of go, well, that's kind of a problem, because, you know, we should all be able to I mean, my answer would be, well, give me an hour here, and then we'll talk about it. You know, there's so many people that we are influenced by. And of course, at some point, and usually in different periods of our lives, we get hung up on this person or that player. And eventually, it all comes together. It all amalgamates into kind of who we are. But I can't stress enough how important it is to be listening. And then to study. Find a good teacher. And practice your fundamentals. And I'll play a few of what I'm talking about here. On the bass, one of the things that we really can't do is we really can't be lifting our fingers all the time. And I see that a lot. When we have bands that are live, I often say, boy, I wish I had an hour with that student, because they clearly kind of have a pretty good feel here, and they look like they enjoy it. But their approach is just not, it's not going to work. It's going to hang them up. For example, if I'm playing a scale, like maybe, you know, it's kind of a hybrid F, if you will, but I don't lift my fingers because I want every pitch to connect. And with double bass, we get this big hump on every pitch anyway. So we can hold those pitches, and that swings harder, and it drives better. So you got to make sure you don't lift your fingers. Whatever scale, whatever arpeggio, whatever you're working on, and you work on all of those, preferably with a bow as well, bow and pits. So that's really important. So if I see a player play and I see all this, I think, uh-oh, that's not it. I should never see your fingers move. And my heroes, all my bass heroes, from from every decade, from the 30s on, none of them lift their fingers when they play. They just don't. You can't do it. You can't do it. You know, even if I'm something simple like this, you know, whatever we're playing, all the notes, I like to say, are in the hand. So if your hand is down and you've got the hand in the right position, you're going to have those pitches more or less in tune, right? One of my great stories, years ago, I was at a bar, and I was watching a jazz trio that featured the great Leroy Vinegar on bass. And they were playing two nights. There's the Howard Johnsons. Remember the Howard Johnsons? Well, anyway, I had never seen Leroy play, and I didn't know him that well. I had heard the name because he was a big name. I think he was Downbeat's new star in 1957. Worked with Andre Previn. He worked with everybody. He was one of the cats. And I saw him that first night, and I kind of went away thinking that this guy really couldn't play. I was really quite naive. And because he never got up here on the bass, he stayed down low all the time, always down here in the first maybe 3 positions, if that. I didn't understand what he was doing. And then the next night I came back, and it hit me like, oh my goodness, he doesn't have to go all over the bass because he knows all his notes and his chords. It's like a piano player voicing like this. They don't go, they're not all, they're comping and they're putting everything right here because they know how to alter this hand position to that chord, to this chord. So I try to walk, if I'm walking the bass, for example, I try to practice walking in every position without moving my hands out of that position. So if I'm in first half, this was like a blues, 4 chord, 1 chord, 6 chord, 2 chord, 5, 1, 6, 2, 5. Now do that a half step higher without moving. Now I moved. You dig? 5th position. Okay, moved. So you practice that kind of stuff. You keep your fingers down, and you know what's in the hand. And in order to get that really well is practice. And I won't be too long here, but we want to practice. I mean, we have to physically be on the bass, and I used to look in the mirror all the time. And I would be kind of nuts about it. Actually, it was almost a detriment because I spent so much time working on technique. I had to go back later and go, wait a minute, there's music to this too. But I was watching myself and trying to emulate Paul Chambers. What does Paul Chambers do? I mean, what does he look like? What does Ray Brown look like when he plays? That's where I was at. And it was important. I think we all have to go through that. How do I stand? You know, one of my favorite bass players is George Mraz, a great Czech player. Sometimes I'll go on a gig and I'll think, what would George look like doing this? And it kind of gets me in that mode because he plays really, he doesn't move around much and he has this effortless mastery to his playing. He doesn't, it's not like he's fighting anything. You know, it's all smooth. And if I get that in my head, visualize that, it's kind of important. But I like to practice, too, double stops. You go on YouTube, you guys, you people, gals, guys, everybody, and you watch some of these tutorials, and you're going to see the world's great players, classical jazz, whatever. There's one of Eddie Gomez, the great Eddie Gomez, famous mainly for playing with Bill Evans and Chick Corea and people like that. Anyway, he's in his late 70s now, and he's in front of an audience at the Dave Gage's bass shop in New York, and he says, he walks up with his bass, it's just he and piano, and he goes, you're probably all bass players, right? Oh, yeah, we're all bass players. He says, and he has a bass that's probably not his, because his bass is all around him. And he goes, well, let's see, he picks up the bass, and he goes, and he says, you do this every day, right? You find your pitches every day. And he's playing double stops. He's playing fifths, which is kind of the basis for most of our hand positions. He says, you got to do this every day, and because it'll elude you. You haven't played in a few days, pick up the bass, and it's like, what's that hand shape again? No, it's that. Oh, my goodness, why was I, it's got to be. So we're always playing double stops, finding our pitches. And so, and there's a world of time spent doing that right now, just, sitting down, where are the pitches? So you got to play your scales up and down the bass. You don't lift your fingers, and you have a good bass, hopefully, that's set up properly. And you go to a luthier or a shop that can do that for you, and you figure out, you look up what kind of strings that people play. You have to know this. This is on you. Nobody has to tell you this. You can just go to find out what kind of strings did Ray Brown play? Oh, he played those. Okay, I'll try those. Or what kind of pickup did he use? I used the Full Circle by Fishman. Great pickup. It doesn't get in the way of tone production acoustically. It's right there. It's in the adjusting wheel. It seems to work out great. In fact, the engineer today said, "Boy, that sounds really good through the system." Well, anyway. So it's all out there for us. You know, you look, you listen, you ask questions, and you emulate. It's steal. Little germs of bass lines, bass solos, whatever, and listen to all the other players too. Everything that Professor Nichol and Professor Lindahl said, and Dr. Smith, everything, it all applies to us too. So do it. That's it for me.
Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Spencer. I'm professor of percussion here at Central. I'm going to talk to you about playing drum set in a jazz band or a jazz combo. I kind of want to lead it off with what I think are the 5 main roles of a jazz drummer, or of any drummer, really, whether you're playing in an orchestra or anything else, but it really works well if I keep these 5 ideas in mind when I'm playing improvised music or music that's slightly written out. The first priority is time, all right? I'm going to list all 5 of them real quick so we just get them out there. First priority is time. The second priority is style. Is it the right type of feel that you're creating? And then the third thing is form. What is the form of the tune you're playing? Are you playing 12-bar blues? Are you playing AABA? The fourth thing is setups and ensemble licks, right? Sometimes you're playing along, you got to bring the band in. They're lost because they have to count 8 bars and the trumpets are, gone already. And so you have to bring them in, so we have to understand how to bring them in. And the fifth thing, the least important thing in drumming, in my opinion, are solos. The least important thing are solos. My job as a drummer in a jazz band or in a combo is to support those guys in front, to give them a blanket to lie back on that's going to allow them to play their brains out and feel comfortable about where they are. And so I tend to turn, and so often we get, wow, that was a great solo, that guy's got great hands, or she's really roaring around and stuff. That's great, but if the time isn't there and the style and the form isn't there, that person won't get hired again, all right? Because it's rare that we sign the checks. It's usually someone on the front who signed the checks, and if it's the trumpet player, I want to make sure that trumpet player is super happy with how I'm playing and how I'm supporting them. So let's talk about those 5 roles. Time. Okay, so I'm super fortunate, stupid fortunate, to play with someone like Ed Fedewa, who has time like a rock. It is immovable. It's so nice. Because what's nice about that, when I work with a bass player like that, is I can stretch it sometimes, and I always know when I come back where that time's going to be. And the same is true for him, too. He can stretch, and when I hear him messing around, then I'll just really lay it down and make it solid. So how do we work on time? How do we work on anything? Practice. And one way to do is, with a metronome, right, and just kind of playing and make sure that you're just, can you do this? And have that be absolutely non-moving, right? Just practicing something like that. And in a variety of time signatures. Can you play in 4? Can you play in 3? Can you play in 5? All right? Can you do all those and keep that nice, steady quarter note? And I'm not even swinging yet, right? I'm not throwing it. I'm not going. All I'm doing is making sure that I can play solid, good metronomic time, all right? Now, within that, we do have to then apply the ride, R-I-D-E rhythm, which is 1, 2 to 3, 4 to 1, 2 to 3, 4 to 1. And while I completely embrace what Dr. Lindahl was talking about, how jazz is not necessarily based on triplets, for those of you starting out, base it on triplets. Right? Give yourself that foundation of I can really do all these permutations within triplets, and then you can squish and knead that and do what you need to it later on. But baby, let's lay down those triplets. So I'm playing. All right, so it's 1, 2 triplet 3, 4 triplet 1, 2 triplet 3, right? Here's how I play that. And what I actually do is to watch closely what my hand is doing. How many times my hand moves, my wrist turns for every bar of 4. I'm going 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. If you look closely, my hand is really just moving twice in each measure. It's playing on 2 and 4. 1, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 4, 2. And once that's solid, then I just allow it to skip note and beat 1, the skip note and beat 3 to kind of show up. I let that bounce off the cymbal and I kind of control it with my fingers. And you're going, well, okay, that's great, you know. And at that tempo, I could stroke every one of those notes. But at a brisk tempo, when you're playing something like Cherokee or something like that, right? I'm still moving my hand just twice a measure because I don't got time. It's going too fast. I can't possibly wrist out all those notes at that tempo. No, wait, my right arm would fall off. So practice that technique at slower tempos. Do it for ballads. A dear friend of mine and percussion pedagogue, John Mallard, way back out in the Northwest, he would call it stroke a bounce. Stroke a bounce. Stroke a bounce. Stroke a bounce. And to work that with just 2 strokes per measure. And what that does is that kind of gives it that little bit of a lean on 2 and 4, which kind of helps the general jazz feeling of what's going on. In fact, in almost all popular music, right? So creating that time with a jazz feel, and think of that going with just those 2 strokes, that's great for the jazz style, for a swing or jazz style. Now, there's other types of jazz, like when we played Latin. And here's what I mean. You need to be able to play comfortably in a jazz with the swing style, with the skip rhythm that I just shown you there, the ride rhythm. But you got to be able to play some straight 8 stuff as well. You got to be able to play. All right. So you've got to have control over those types of feels. So learn a bossa nova, learn a samba. More than likely, if you see a chart that says Latin, those are the 2 styles that you're going to be called upon. It'd be lovely if it was an actual mambo, which is an Afro-Cuban groove. But just starting out, boy, you want to know a bossa nova and you want to know a samba. You need to have those in your hands. And then, of course, every once in a while, we do play rock and roll. All right, or fusion-y type things. Right? And I know, the point is that I have those 3 basic styles, jazz, swing, Latin, and rock and roll, and then I use the appropriate style. I certainly wouldn't play that last feel for Satin Doll. Boo-ba-doo, bobby, perky, 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 bee. That's like a round peg, square hole, right? That would be a swing chart. The same type of thing. I wouldn't play Smells Like Teen Spirit with brushes and a ballad, right? So you need to have the appropriate style. The last thing I kind of want to get to, and if I have time I can go further, is form. You need to know the form of the tune. If I'm playing a 12-bar blues, like we did just a minute ago, that means I'm counting all the time. I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 12, 2, 3, 4, because I need to know that the 12th bar, I got to outline the beginning of the form, because it's 12, and then 12 more, and then 12 more. And I need to let the horn players know where we are, and the bass player know where we are, or at least let them know that I know where we are so that we're all comfortable that here we are in the form. So here I go. I'm going to play 12 bars of swing. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I played that form 3 times. At the 12th bar, each time I did something a little bit different to signal to the rest of the band, hey guys, here we are, or I know where we are, because sometimes, they're wondering if I'm where I'm supposed to be. I did it 3 different ways. The first time was kind of a medium, big splashy thing, and just a little, all right, in the 12th measure. The second time, I filled up that whole measure, all right? And then the third time, I did a real subtle thing. I just changed my ride cymbal pattern just a little bit. Instead of 1, 2 to 3, 4 to 1, 2 to 3, I went 1, 2, 3 to 4, 1, right? I just changed it a bit, which was a little signal that everyone goes, oh yeah, here we are. So we need to outline that form. Now, not all forms are 12 bars. There's a lot that are 16-bar forms, right? Or some are AABA forms, which is generally a 32-bar form, four sets of 8 bars. There's some that are odd. We play stuff in this group that sometimes it's 9-bar forms or 13-bar forms, and you have to really know that. The form is your Bible when it comes to playing, especially in small group stuff. You and the bass player have to really be dialed into that stuff. So again, those horns are comfortable where they are when they're trying to improvise, and they know where in the music they are. Just a couple more things. A lot of times, especially when we start playing in big band, but in a group like this, a septet, it shows up often as well. A lot of times in big band, we'll have something, you're playing along, and on the 4th measure, the horns go 1, 2, 3, 4, boo, bop, 2, 3, 4, right? So you're cooking along, you play 3 bars at a time, and you say 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, boo, bop, right? And we might have in our chart, the chart we're reading, that dotted quarter note and an 8th note. We're supposed to play those notes. And a lot of times I see young players doing this. 2, 3, right? So they hit both those notes, the boo, bop, they go boo, bop. But the horn players aren't playing it that way. They're going do, dop, they're playing a long note and a short note. Now, why don't I do the same thing? And this is where you start to become a little bit more advanced as a jazz player, right? Why don't I do the same thing? Instead of do, dop, how about, this is my long sound, but there's my short sound. So if you think that line, boo, bop, right, that starts to sound like what the horns are playing. So if I play it like this, right? All of a sudden, I'm matching my durations to the horns that I'm playing with. So when you're playing those big ensemble licks, those big shout choruses with the horns and the rest of the band, and you've got to play the same rhythms as them, play the same durations as they are as well. That really helps a lot. Okay? I have about, 45 more minutes to talk. Actually, I just have a couple more. So the last thing I want to talk about, I said this was a minute ago, but this really is the last thing. Sometimes we've got to bring the horns in. We've got to give them a setup. So let's take that same example where they come in on the 4th bar and they're going boo, bop. Well, they might be lost having to count 8 bars or something like that. So I got to bring them in. I got to remind them that they have to play. And so what I do is I have to give them the beat before they play. So if they come in on 1, I have to give them 4. So the simplest setup is like this. Pretend your horns, and on the 4th bar you're going boo, bop. So it'll be 2, 3, right? That's the world's easiest setup. I just give them the quarter note before they come in, the beat before they come in. If you want to get hipper, you add one note, the last partial of a triplet before that beat 4. 2, 3, 2. Right? So that was 1, 2, 3, 4. I could put a triplet on beat 3. 1, 2. I could put a whole bar of triplets. Right? But what I'm leading to is always giving them the beat before they come in, and don't go past that beat. I won't go, but it'll be 4, 1, all right? So when you're doing those setups, give your band the beat before they come in. They will thank you profusely. I believe I'm out of time. I believe we might have a chat room going on. If there's some questions, we'll try and answer them. My colleagues are here. Doesn't look like there's any because we were so brilliant. I'd like to thank my friends here. And I can't reaffirm enough the idea of listening. Becoming a great musician is a balance between listening to the music you're trying to play and practicing. The more structured I am, the freer I become. Stravinsky said that. But if you're a garage band drummer and you want to play in a jazz group, you got to start listening to jazz. You got to start listening to Philly Joe and Miles and all the great drummers, listening to Jeff Hamilton, etc. So here's my colleagues here. Here we are. Thank you all very much for your attention. Go play some great music.